Welcome to Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Being a fireman, father, veteran, husband, world record holder, and Ironman, he brings stories of experience to impact your life while challenging you to live it. What do you want from your life? Why do you want it? Are you willing to go through the challenges to get there? If you have the courage to take that first step, let this podcast be the catalyst to start your fire, while you bring the resilience to make it continue to burn. Our lives are made up of moments called right nows. So let's get started. Forged in the Fires podcast with your host, Fireman Rob, begins now.
All right, welcome back to Forged in the Fires podcast. I'm your host, Fireman Rob. We've got a great guest today. If you're not active, you're going to be active after this gentleman, John Simmerman. He's been with active towns for a long time. He started it. He is somebody that I really treasure my friendship with. I met him a long time ago, and just a great individual. I got the honor to be on his podcast. So you know what? Might as well return the favor. John, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Rob. Thank you so much.
Well, we date back a while, and actually it was funny. I was thinking back about this the other day, and when I was at Kona in 2012, you had an organization there in Hawaii that you actually kind of led into more of the active towns, but tell me more about PATH.
Yeah, so I was on the board of directors for many years for PATH, which is the local nonprofit advocacy organization on the Big Island, the island of Hawaii. And PATH is an acronym. It stands for People's Advocacy for Trails Hawaii. And I had the honor of serving many, many years as a volunteer. And then right around 2012, which was when you and I met as part of Kona, the World Championship for the Ironman distance triathlon. I was also participating in the race the year that you were participating. I was participating as a local, which is different, and we can talk a little bit about that later.
And a lot faster, that's true too.
Yeah, well, I'm not that fast, believe me. I my name was also pulled out of a hat. The locals. The criteria that we had back then in 2012 is that if you participated in the half Ironman distance, the 70.3, the Honu race, you had the opportunity to have your name pulled out of the hat. So it was literally the luck of the draw from all the locals that happened to be there, both Hawaii Island locals as well as locals from the entire state. Anywho, so PATH, I was involved with that. But by that time, by 2012, I had actually founded my own nonprofit, the Advocates for Healthy Communities, and had not yet launched the initiative, the Active Towns Initiative, but that would come soon. That would actually come the next year in 2013. And so it was such a joy to get to meet you and Nicole and be able to, really kind of, get plugged into everything and really get to experience your journey as, because that was sort of early on in your
early
journey. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love the fact around really you found your passion in that living and inspiring physical activity. When did that start for you? When did that advocacy to help people understand the power of wellness, when did that really start for you?
Well, it came in different layers. It wasn't like a single event necessarily, but certainly dating back to my time as a child where I grew up on a small ranch. It was basically 2 or 3 miles outside of a small rural community in Northern California called Lincoln, California. And, It was like a physically active lifestyle. I was a member of 4-H, and then when I went into high school, I was a member of the FFA, the Future Farmers of America. And, living on that small ranch, I mean, we were always doing physical labor. I mean, we were building fences, repairing, barns, wrestling sheep, handling our horses, dealing with cattle and things of that nature. But a key event happened when I was in 7th grade, I believe, and I pulled my back out. And I was talking with my mom about this the other day. We think it was I had, wrenched my back while trying to start the lawnmower,
All the other activities, it's starting a lawnmower.
Exactly. And this was some time ago. So when I say starting a lawnmower, lawnmowers back then didn't have electric, ignitions. You were pulling on a cord.
Yeah.
And so I was in seventh grade, pulled my back out. Well, it didn't get better. And I mean, I was in debilitating pain. I couldn't do the normal active stuff that I was used to. In addition to being out on the ranch, I was, active in football, active in Little League baseball and things of that nature. So, mom had to get me to the doctor, and eventually it became clear that I actually had, a fairly significant amount of scoliosis, which was then, exacerbating the challenge, because what ended up happening was, of course, a muscle, got aggravated, and then that started pinching a nerve. Well, what that did is it triggered in me, because it was drilled into me, that if I didn't take some preventative actions and think about, identifying weaknesses like core abdominal strength, and realizing that you've got a little bit of a crook in your back there, you need to kind of train yourself a little bit better. That started more intentionality, more intentional training to try to address a potential weakness. And then that actually, spawned a passion in me to want to become a doctor. Originally, I wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon, because that was who I went to, was an orthopedic surgeon. And he was like, "Well, I'm not gonna do surgery on you unless it's the last ditch effort, or the worst case scenario." He's like, we need to do PT, physical therapy, and we need to do addressing your weaknesses. And so I really bought into that concept of, I held him upon high. I was like, I want to be like that guy.
Right.
And it wasn't until later that I realized that it wasn't necessarily being a doctor per se, but I wanted to be engaged in prevention, proactive activity that prevents stuff that is preventable. And that didn't really happen until I was in college, was starting to study for the MCATs, and was starting to head down the road of becoming a doctor, and then got a little bit disillusioned, and was like, maybe I don't want to be a doctor per se, but I want to prevent illness. I want to prevent injury. The big thing back in the early 80s that we were focused on when it comes to health promotion and disease prevention was presenting our nation's number one killer, which is heart disease. And so that's when I went all in. I went to graduate school immediately after undergrad, did my undergrad at USC, and then did my graduate work at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, went straight on through, 6 years straight through, and then got involved in health promotion, disease prevention, and that launched a 15-year long career in that. And that was about 15 years ago that I sort of pivoted and started focusing more on the built environment and health and how our community design influences our behavior and influences our ability to live a healthy, active lifestyle.
How did you, I love that path that you took, and it all centers around a passion or a purpose. How did you pivot? Because I think it's actually interesting that you talked about it. You had that uniform idea of, I want to help people. And then it changed to prevention. How did you change that purpose or passion? Can you take me back to those moments? Because I think a lot of people get confused when they talk about purpose or passion. It's like, well, do I have to have it my whole life? Or it's my family. How do you change the trajectory of that purpose or passion when you feel so strongly that this is my path? I'm going to take this MCAT. How do you change that?
Well, it doesn't come easy, because you have to start giving up on some dreams. And, hindsight can sometimes be 20/20, and you can be like, oh gosh, maybe I really should have done this.
Right.
In other words, maybe I should have still gone through, stuck with it, become a doctor. Because what I ended up learning later on down the line was, oh yeah, I didn't have to, abandon that dream per se, but I didn't have to be the type of quote unquote doctor that I was assuming. So I had some assumptions that were there. But to get more to your point is that, that passion that I had of wanting to be in a position to help other people, I think it was inherent. It was inherent in sort of my upbringing as a child, in that small rural community. But I had a desire to do things beyond just that little community. And what I mean by that was, as soon as I had the chance, I was like, really engaging myself in activities that were seen as altruistic and volunteer work. It was very much a part of my upbringing with involvement in 4-H and things of that nature. And very soon I found myself, volunteering on the ski patrol up in Lake Tahoe. And again, what was I doing? I was actually rescuing people who had, broken their legs or blown their knees out or something like that. And then in doing that, in my mind, it was all logical, because it was like, yeah, I'm getting experience, emergency medicine experience. That's going to be helpful for me as I head towards medical school and all that sort of stuff. But sometimes, changes and pivots happen when you least expect it. And one of my favorite stories about that sort of pivot is that, you're going through life, you do something, and it just sort of, the epiphany sort of does it reveal itself. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's a singular event, but in retrospect, you're like, oh, this was sort of building up, and this was an awareness that just finally hit you across the head. And that story, of course, is when I moved from Boulder, Colorado to Hawaii. I moved to Honolulu, and I made that move because I needed a change of scenery. I needed a change of pace. I had gotten out of the health promotion, disease prevention industry after 15 years of being in it, and I needed to do something else. Right. And where better but to go to paradise and go to Hawaii.
I mean, I'm in with you right there.
There you go. And so when I was a surfer too, so I was like, yeah, I needed to re-engage with the water and all of that. So I made the move from Boulder, Colorado to Hawaii. But the epiphany, one of the epiphanies that happened is I realized that our built environment, our communities, are how they're structured, how they're built, really has an influence on our lives. And so that year when I made that move and I went to work in a medical industry, I was actually calling on various doctors, throughout the state and helping work with their patients on, specific types of pain management issues in the orthopedic world. And it was a wonderful opportunity to do this. But here's the deal, is that I was also signed up to race my next Ironman. I was supposed to go back to Penticton to do Ironman Canada once again. And that was my very first Ironman ever back in 1996 was Ironman Canada. And so I wanted to go back to Penticton. It held a special place in my heart. So I wanted to go back. I was signed up, ready to go there. But I arrived in Honolulu and I'm like, I can't ride my bike here. This is absolutely insane. Unless I drive all the way to the North Shore or over to the Windward area, riding your bike anywhere in the Honolulu metropolitan area, Honolulu proper, it's an auto-oriented, violent, sort of conflict-laden place. And, some of the guys that I was training with, that, I got established with there was just like one nightmare after another of another, crash and another collision. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this. And so I pulled out of Canada, sold my bike box, and just put all my efforts and energy into the ocean. And so I surfed more, and then I learned outrigger canoe paddling, which is really the true Hawaiian sport is outrigger canoe paddling. And I joined a canoe club and really just instilled myself in Hawaiian culture, and did that for an entire year until I had an opportunity to shift gears and move to the Big Island, move to Kona.
Yeah.
And you know the rest of the story. As soon as I moved to Kona, I got boom. Within the first month, I got re-engaged with Ironman, started volunteering for the World Championship race, and that lit the fire. I re-established, doing the races, and I bought a new bike and got back into it. Well, what happened during that time, other than just, a change of island and a new job over to, on the Big Island, was that I had that epiphany. It's like, oh yeah, duh, this. It's like your environment that you're in. If it doesn't support, healthy, active living, i.e., it doesn't support you riding your bike either for recreation or sport or utilitarian purposes in your neighborhood, you're going to be less likely to do it. And so that really shifted my thinking and shifted my gear. And I just jumped right into understanding more about how transportation decisions, how city planning, how architecture influences our ability to live a healthy, active lifestyle. And that's, and then, a few years, I immediately started volunteering with PATH, immediately started volunteering with other organizations. And then, fast forward to, 2011, 2012, then launching my own nonprofit. And I always did it with the intention that it would be a nationally based nonprofit. It's actually incorporated in Boulder, Colorado. And it has given me the opportunity to travel all over the country, all over the world. So it's good stuff.
That's amazing. ActiveTowns.org. I love going back, because there's like three different things that I identified when you were talking about, when you wanted to become a doctor and you saw it as a certain way that you would be a doctor. And then later in life, when you actually got more experience, you actually understood, whoa, I could have been a lot of different ways. And then then you go to Honolulu and you're like, I want a bike. And that environment wasn't conducive. So you started surfing. It's interesting correlating that to everyday life, to individuals and their environments and how they limit themselves because of the environments around them, not only mentally, but physically. Talk to me more about how you transition, because I think that's, for me, I'm sitting here going, how did you just do that? Because that's a huge thing for people, that they're so scared of that unknown that it debilitates them. And then they just say, okay, well, I'm just going to stay at this level because that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think once you sort of get like a hint that, oh, this might be my path, it's like, get curious on that. It's like,
that's
really
a great idea.
Lean into that, and you're going to have self-talk that says, oh no, this is too scary and all that. Be brave, be courageous in that, and really take the time to sit with yourself and think about why you're passionate about that. And for me, I was just so incredibly passionate about the prevention of disease.
Right.
Being able to, help people live their best possible life. And we just can't. We can't live our best possible life if we don't have our health and well-being.
Right.
And, with activity, with physical activity, I found like that magic bullet. Like I said earlier, I first found it, by targeted training and rehabilitation to be able to get my mobility back and be able to be a happy kid again. But then it also became, quite obvious that, yeah, this is like one of the key things that helps us be a more complete human. And what I mean by that is physical activity is who we are as humans. Every single major disease that we have, chronic disease that we have, that is, that's out there. I mean, when you look at cancer, when you look at heart disease, you look at obesity and all the things that then leads to, diabetes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Physical inactivity, the lack of physical activity, is a primary risk factor.
Right.
And it really wasn't until, the last 100, 150, 200 years before, it's like, this is a new thing for the human species of, sitting in front of a computer all day long or sitting at a desk and living a truly inactive lifestyle. And so, I got really, really passionate about that. And like I said, I had a very, very satisfying career for that first 15 years out of graduate school, helping companies decrease their healthcare costs and helping people live vibrant, active lifestyles. And, like you said, then I had that pivot of, I stepped away from doing that application of doing this and then discovered a different application of doing the same thing, but looking more at the community level and looking at how a boulder becomes bolder, where just physical activity oozes out of every nook and cranny of this. And Madison is a big part of that too. Madison is a very active, vibrant place. And we do see that with many university towns, is that, these college towns tend to have a lot of activity and vibrancy to them, and people out moving around, walking, biking, participating in activity, and they tend to be healthier environments. And as humans, as a human species, when we see other people out there living a healthy, active, vibrant lifestyle, we're like, doctor says I need to get more activity in. They're out there doing it. I can identify with them. They seem pretty happy about this. You know what? I'm going to consider doing this.
Right.
I'm going to do this. So, yeah.
How do you see creativity come into this? Because you mentioned about, this is the first time as like humans that we're having this struggle between our technology and our activity. How much of being creative in what you can do for fitness, what you can do for wellness, has gone away from this community that we have now, where they're looking at it and going, well, I can't do this because of this isn't right, or the weather's not good. Whereas before we just go out and do it. How much of that do you see?
That's a good observation, a good question. How much does creativity have in this? I mean, one of the things that we're finding ourselves in the midst of, especially since we're talking in the midst still of a global pandemic, is that we've gotten creative about trying to find ways to get physical activity into our lifestyle. Many of our same routines have been upset. So maybe your same routine was, you had a group of friends that you used to, maybe run with or go bike rides with, or you were a gym person and you would go to, a fitness facility, and that's been shut down or whatever. Maybe it's reopened, but it's slightly different. Or maybe you were a spin class person or group exercise classes, and those got altered. And so what we saw is that humans are incredibly adaptable, and they will quickly, put on their creativity hat and
right.
say, well, gosh, and one of the things that we saw in cities around the country and around the world is that people were flocking to their neighborhoods and flocking to their streets. And so you saw very, very quickly, because the trails were too narrow and the sidewalks were too narrow. And what we ended up seeing was people taking over the streets. The number of motor vehicle traffic, especially during the height of the pandemic and the lockdown, the initial lockdown, right. Those motor vehicle numbers were way, way down. People were sort of sheltering in place, but they needed to get out for health and well-being. And so people started, getting creative, and they're like, let's go for a bike ride with the kids. And
exactly.
And guess what? There's no cars. Let's ride right down the middle of the street. And, and normally that just wouldn't be rational. You wouldn't even consider doing that. Except for in my neighborhood, we don't have sidewalks in our neighborhood. So our streets are shared streets 24/7. But because the numbers increased by 5-fold, by 7-fold, by 10-fold, it just reinforced to the motor vehicle drivers in the neighborhood that, you need to be cognizant of the fact that, around this corner, there could be a kid. Around this corner, there could be an elderly person who is there. And so I think creativity is a big part of that, because the ability to reimagine, outside of what was previously an ingrained routine, and say, well, maybe we can go do this. So yeah, I think creativity is a big part of it, and also being open to new things, to trying new things.
Right.
And oftentimes what I'm working on with cities around the country and around North America is encouraging communities to try a new thing, to try putting in protected bike infrastructure. And what happens is you get resistance, because there's that's change. And so that induces fear. And so now we get back into that whole cycle.
Change and fear.
Change and fear. And so one of the techniques that's emerged over the last 10 years is something called tactical urbanism. And this is where the creativity comes in, is you say, hey, look, we're just going to do this. We're going to do a pilot project, and we're going to add some creativity to this. And we're going to give you a chance as a neighborhood to give this a try and see what you think about it. And ultimately what happens is people, are like, oh, I see what you mean now. The fear level goes down, the hackles go down, and they're like, actually, you know what? I kind of like this. I feel safer riding my bike if there's some physical separation from these motor vehicles. Thumbs up. We're good on this. So I think that creativity is something that, again, we're creative people. We, as a species, we have something that is very, very powerful, and that's imagination. We can imagine what things could be. And I think that's a big part of what creativity, there's a genesis there in creativity with imagination.
I love the level of advocacy you have. It's you can feel it, even being on a podcast, you can feel the passion behind what you're saying about having that healthy lifestyle, having that wellness in the community, and also being active in your community to be able to help others who may not know what they do need to be able to get out there. And I think if you go to activetowns.org, you can find out more. John, you've given us so much. I love it. And I want to appreciate you for being on here today. But at the same point, we have 3 questions for you at the end. I always end the same. Are you ready?
I am ready.
No cheat. I hope you didn't cheat. No, I'm just kidding. What would be one of the biggest suggestions or advice that you would give to your 18-year-old self?
Again, don't be afraid of failure. Put yourself out there, and, if there's a ... to that, don't be so worried about what other people think.
Great advice. That is some of the best advice. I know with 3 kids of my own, it's like, that is something that they need to take to heart and live each day. Definitely.
Well, it's empowering too, when you think of it, because, going back to what we were talking about before, is addressing, being able to pivot. Well, part of that equation that I had to think through is, gosh, I had, it's like there's that fear of failure, and it's like, oh, but I was doing this, and what are the other people going to think that I had said I was going to be a doctor, but I didn't become a doctor. Yeah. So it's like you gotta figure out your passion and go for it.
I love it. Now, here's the second question. This kind of ties in a little bit, but what would be, a lot of people are going through challenges and struggles. What would be 2 daily habits? It can be in the morning or in the evening that you would suggest that they start to incorporate into their life to start living forward.
I like that. Yeah, 2 daily habits. Now, I'm gonna pick one right off the bat, which is something that I have really been striving to incorporate, recently, and that is trying to get up at the same time each day and immediately sitting down with my cup of coffee and
Kona coffee.
It's not Kona coffee. If I could only afford to have Kona coffee with me all the time, that would be wonderful. But sitting down with a cup of coffee, and I call it my morning stoic reflections. Oh, wow. And so I'm going through day by day a book by Ryan Holiday called The Daily Stoic, and there's a passage. So it's one for each day, and it's some sort of stoic reflection. And so I take that time to, and it ends up being right around 30 minutes or so of just reading that particular stoic reflection, and then taking the time to add maybe some additional leadership or additional stoic observations. And then that becomes like the transition to looking at my day and figuring out, okay, today at 2 p.m., I'm going to be talking with Rob, and we're going to be doing this awesome podcast. And I'm going to make sure that, I confirm that, everything's looking good for that. And, so it's that start to the day, having that routine and taking time to reflect a little bit.
It's almost like warming up to pull the cord for the lawnmower.
Yeah.
Bringing back to the story, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's a good point. I mean, because what that lesson did teach me is, even though I was this active kid, right, I had weaknesses that were undiagnosed. Yeah. And so that would be my second daily habit is, obviously, daily movement. Do what you can. Get out there. Be active. And I'm a huge, huge proponent for getting outdoors, getting some fresh air. Because even if you, like, for instance, I haven't felt necessarily well enough to go out and do my normal routine, which would be a challenging trail run. And the reason I haven't been feeling so well is I was fortunate enough to get my first vaccine, my first shot I was with the Moderna vaccine. And so, I was feeling pretty achy and a little bit, and I just didn't feel well enough to run, but I still felt well enough to be able to get out, get some fresh air, get a nice vigorous walk in, take some time to clear my head. And so those two things I think are just magical, is, that morning routine, setting some time, some reflection, thinking about what your day is going to be, and then making sure that you program in some physical activity. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be, athletic per se. But if that floats your boat, go for it. Go get that run in, or get that bike ride in, or lift some weights, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that you do something physically active.
I love it. I could have picked that second one out.
Yeah.
All right, here's the last one. This is fun. We always get all over the board on this one. So if you had 3 people that you could have coffee with at a firehouse table, realistically, nothing is off the table. You can talk about anything. They can be deceased or alive. Who would they be and why?
Ah, boy. Okay.
I'm challenging you now.
Yeah. So if I were to look at, like going back in time, I would look at, and since my mind has been around the Stoics here recently, if I had a Stoic coffee opportunity and coffee date, it would be Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus.
Wow.
And we'd be going over some stuff. And for folks that don't really know those names, or they're somewhat, familiar, Seneca, of course, was one of the key Stoics, as was Epictetus. Marcus Aurelius was actually not a Stoic per se. He was actually a Roman emperor. And he was a Roman emperor that every single day journaled and wrote, essentially what ended up becoming a book called Meditations. Although it was just his writings to himself. It was just him. It was like his daily diary. He never intended it to be published. But it was these reflections, and he was like thinking about life, how to live a good life, and how to be true to being the best human that he could be. And it just, by the way, it just so happened he was the emperor of Rome. Just
random.
So that would be, who I would do if I were to, reach back in time to that. I have a different list if we want.
I want to hear the other list too.
Modern folks, two people who are alive and one person who has since left us. And the person who is no longer with us is Jane Jacobs. And Jane was a prolific writer and community activist in New York City. She, wrote some amazing books about the power of community, and really is like the patron saint of creating viable, vibrant communities. Jan Gehl, who is still alive, and I've had the opportunity to meet Jan and sit next to him during a conference and during a presentation where he was going to be up on stage. And he's actually from Copenhagen. He's a Dane, and so he handed his phone or his camera to me and says, "Would you please snap a photo of me?" I'm like, "Absolutely, you're one of my absolute heroes." He's one of the most influential writers in my life, because he really talked about how to design communities, cities for people. And in fact, that's his famous book, Cities for People. And then the third person would be Chuck Marohn. Chuck is a good friend of mine. He runs an organization called Strong Towns. And we would just have, the four of us would just have an amazing conversation. And I could just, I have this imagination of the type of things that we would talk about. And I think Chuck would be delighted to have that opportunity to have Jane, around that coffee table as well, and carrying on that conversation. So
I love the collaboration and networks that you talk about. And that's the thing we want people to think about. Being creative, just like you said, being active and being well. Go to activetowns.org. John, it has been a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast, and please share this episode with a friend or family. To find out more about Fireman Rob or reach out about a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, live your life forged in the fires.